In the shattered history of the Westlands, the name Logain Ablar is etched in two conflicting truths. To some, he is a pretender, a false dragon who raised armies, spilled blood, and dared to claim the destiny of the Dragon Reborn. To others, he is a martyr, a man broken by the White Tower's gentling, a soul stripped of power only to find a greater purpose. Few truly understand the tragedy of his rise, the agony of his fall, and the quiet miracle of his awakening. He was hunted as a usurper, imprisoned as a threat, and stilled as a monster. But in the loss of everything he thought he wanted, he found the clarity to become something far greater than a king. This is not a tale of ambition or conquest. This is the untold redemption of Logain Ablar, a man who wore the crown of a pretender, only to learn that true glory lies not in ruling, but in protecting. In this first chronicle of his epic saga, we dissect his fateful rise as a false dragon, the catastrophic gentling that stripped him of his power and his ego, the agonizing stillness that forged his unbreakable resilience, and the quiet awakening that revealed the rot festering at the heart of the Black Tower. He was broken so that he might be remade. He was stripped so that he might see. He was forgotten so that he might save the very world that rejected him. Chapter 1. The False Dragon. Ambition twisted by destiny. Before the stillness, before the break, before the name Logain Ablar became synonymous with redemption, he was a man consumed by a vision of destiny, of power, of a crown that he believed was his by right. Like all false dragons, Logain was driven mad by the faint, twisted echo of the dragon's call, a fragment of the pattern's resonance that seeped into the minds of men who could channel, twisting their ambition into delusion, their power into conquest. Logain was not born a tyrant. He was born a man of uncommon strength, a channeler whose raw power marked him as something extraordinary from his youth. He felt the weight of the pattern, the stir of ancient destiny, and the call to save the world from the shadow. But he misread the signs. He mistook his own power for the dragon's mantle. He mistook the hunger for glory for the duty of a savior. And so he rose. He gathered followers, men and women who felt the same pull of power, the same longing for meaning. He marched across the Westlands, his banner raised, his army growing with every victory. He conquered cities, toppled lords, and declared himself the Dragon Reborn, not out of malice, but out of a twisted, desperate belief that he was the world's only hope. To Logain, his conquest was not tyranny. It was salvation. His bloodshed was not cruelty. It was the necessary cost of uniting the world against the Dark One. The White Tower saw him only as a threat. Any man who channeled was a danger. Any man who claimed the dragon's mantle was a pretender to be hunted, captured, and stilled. They did not see his confusion. They did not see his desperate courage. They saw only a madman with a sword and a crown, a man who needed to be broken before he destroyed the fragile peace of the light. The campaign against Logain was brutal. The Aes Sedai unleashed their full power, hunting him down like a beast, cornering him, and finally overwhelming him. In the end, he was captured. His army was scattered. His crown was torn from his head, and the White Tower delivered its final, cruel sentence, gentling. The permanent, agonizing removal of a man's ability to channel. The severing of his connection to the One Power. The destruction of the very thing that defined his identity. Chapter 2. The Agony of Stillness. Ego unmade, soul stripped. Bear gentling is not merely a physical punishment. It is a spiritual execution. For a man who can channel, the One Power is as vital as breath, as inherent as sight. To be stilled is to have the air ripped from his lungs, the light torn from his eyes, the very fabric of his soul sliced away. It is a pain no words can describe, a despair so deep it drives most men to suicide within days. Logain Ablar should have died. He should have collapsed into the nothingness that claimed so many stilled men before him, but he did not. In that darkest moment, when his power was gone, his crown was lost, his name was reviled, and his life was over, something impossible happened. Logain Ablar began to wake. The gentling did not break him. It unmade him. It stripped away the ego of the pretender, the delusion of the conqueror, the hunger for glory that had blinded him for so long. It burned away the lies he had told himself, the false destiny he had claimed, the empty ambition that had driven his every step. What remained was not a king, not a pretender, not a warrior. What remained was a man stripped bare, vulnerable, broken, and infinitely stronger for it. The agony of stillness forged in him a resilience no army, no power, no glory could ever grant. He endured the endless emptiness of a life without the one power. And in that endurance, he found something he had never known before: purpose. During his captivity, confined to the shadows of the White Tower, Logain watched. He listened. He studied the world that had rejected him, the Aes Sedai, who feared men who channeled, the politics that blinded the light to the coming darkness. He saw the arrogance of the White Tower, the blindness of its leaders, the fragility of a world that refused to face the truth of the Shadow's return. He saw the lies that bound the light, the fear that crippled its defenders, the rot that was already spreading through the foundations of the world's order. This was the gift of stillness, clarity. Stripped of power, he could see the truth he had never seen while wearing the crown. Freed from ambition, he could understand the danger he had never grasped while chasing glory. Weakened and vulnerable, he could perceive the rot he would have missed while wrapped in the delusion of his own greatness. He was no longer a pretender. He was a witness. Chapter 3: The Shadow of the Black Tower. A corruption unveiled. While Logain languished in the White Tower's captivity, a new power rose in the world: the Black Tower. A fortress of men who could channel, raised by Taim, a man who claimed to serve the Dragon Reborn. To the world, the Black Tower was a symbol of hope, a gathering of the lost, a defense against the shadow. To Logain Ablar, it was a nightmare made flesh. Even in his stilled, weakened state, Logain felt the darkness festering at the heart of the Black Tower. He sensed the corruption, the fear, the compulsion that twisted the Ashaman. The name Taim had given his channelers into something brutal, something violent, something wrong. He saw that Taim was not building an army of protectors. He was forging a weapon of destruction, a blade aimed at the light, a tool of the shadow creeping into the heart of the world's last hope for men who channeled. Logain understood the truth no one else would see. Taim was not a loyal servant of the dragon. He was a traitor, a pawn of the shadow, a man who was using the Black Tower to corrupt, to control, to destroy. Taim was repeating Logain's old mistake, but he was doing it with malice. Where Logain had been driven by delusion, Taim was driven by evil. Where Logain had sought to save the world, Taim sought to burn it down. This revelation forged in Logain a new resolve. He would not remain a captive, a stilled man, a forgotten pretender. He would escape the White Tower. He would find the Black Tower. He would confront the corruption eating away at the Ashaman. He would save the men Taim was destroying, not for power, not for glory, not for a crown, but because it was the right thing to do. Because he knew the pain of being twisted by power, and he would not let another generation suffer as he had. His stillness had given him clarity. His clarity had given him purpose. His purpose would drive him to confront the greatest threat the male channelers of the world had ever known. He was no longer fighting for a crown. He was fighting for souls. Chapter 4: The Pretender Reborn, a soul ready to redeem. When Logain finally escaped the White Tower, he was not the man who had been captured. He was a man reborn. Reborn in suffering, refined in stillness, awakened in truth. The ego of the pretender was gone. The hunger for glory was dead. The delusion of destiny was erased. In its place was a quiet, unshakable resolve to protect, to defend, to redeem, to take the pain he had endured, the power he had lost, the truth he had learned, and turn it into a shield for the men who had no one else to protect them. He knew the road ahead would be bloody. He knew he would face betrayal, fear, and violence. He knew he would be forced to fight a war within the Black Tower's walls, a war against Taim's corruption, a war against the shadow that had already infiltrated the last refuge of male channelers. He knew he would be outmatched, outmaneuvered, and outpowered. But he also knew he had something Taim would never have: the courage to choose mercy over conquest, purpose over power, sacrifice over glory. This was the first transformation of Logain Ablar from a false dragon who sought a crown to a redeemed soul who sought to serve. From a conqueror to a protector. From a pretender to a guardian. The world still saw him as a traitor, a madman, a failed pretender. But Logain Ablar knew the truth. He was no longer pretending. Logain Ablar's journey as a pretender is over. His suffering, his stillness, his captivity have forged him into a weapon of a different kind, a weapon of mercy, of resilience, of redemption. He walks toward the Black Tower not as a conqueror, but as a savior, not as a king, but as a shield. In the chapters to come, we will trace his covert infiltration of the Black Tower, the grassroots formation of his loyalist faction, the quiet resistance against Taim's dread reign, and the brutal tactical liberation that would purify the Ashaman from corruption. We will dissect how a stilled man's resilience became the moral backbone of the Black Tower, and how Logain Ablar reclaimed the soul of the male channelers from the Shadow's grasp. The false dragon is dead. In his place stands a man ready to redeem the world that once rejected him. When Logain Ablar stepped into the Black Tower, he entered not as a conqueror, not as a pretender, not as a man seeking power, but as a spy. A stilled man, broken yet unbowed, entering a fortress of male channelers that had become a den of corruption, fear, and shadow. Mazrim Taim ruled the Ashaman with an iron fist, using compulsion, terror, and the quiet poison of the shadow to twist the Black Tower into a weapon of unbridled destruction. To the world, the Black Tower was the hope of male channelers. To Logain, it was a prison, and he was the only man who could break it open. In our first chronicle, we traced Logain's fall from a false dragon to a stilled captive, and his miraculous awakening in the agony of stillness, a clarity that revealed the Black Tower's rot to his eyes. Now, in this second chapter of his redemptive saga, we dissect his covert rise as the architect of resistance, the grassroots loyalist faction he forged in secret, the unbreakable bond of respect that defeated Taim's reign of fear, his unyielding moral stand against the Shadow's lure, and the tactical liberation that purified the Black Tower and reclaimed the Ashaman's soul. This is the story of a man who turned silence into strength, vulnerability into strategy, and survival into salvation. He did not storm the Black Tower with armies. He won it with loyalty. Logain's greatest advantage inside the Black Tower was his supposed weakness. He was a stilled man. Taim and his dreadlord allies saw him as a broken relic, a failed pretender, a non-threat to their tyrannical rule. They underestimated him. They ignored him. They let him walk the tower's halls, speak with the Ashaman, and witness the full horror of Taim's corruption. And in that invisibility, Logain built his resistance. He did not gather followers with promises of power or glory. He did not use compulsion, threats, or intimidation tactics Taim relied on to control the Ashaman. Instead, Logain built a grassroots loyalist faction from the ground up, one man, one conversation, one act of kindness at a time. He sought out the Ashaman, who still clung to decency, who flinched from Taim's cruelty, who feared the Shadow's corruption but had no one else to turn to. He listened to their pain, acknowledged their fear, and gave them something Taim never would: respect. This faction was not a military army. It was a counterintelligence network. Logain's loyalists moved quietly through the Black Tower, reporting Taim's treachery, warning of purges, shielding young, innocent Ashaman from corruption, and passing secret messages between men who dared not speak aloud. They were farmers, blacksmiths, lords, and commoners. Men from every walk of life, united not by fear, but by faith in Logain's mission, to save the Black Tower, not rule it. Every recruit was an act of quiet rebellion. Every loyalist was a spark of light in Taim's dark fortress. And every day, Logain's network grew stronger, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the moment to rise against the Shadow's puppet ruler. Mazrim Taim's power over the Ashaman rested on two pillars: fear and compulsion. He beat disobedient men into submission. He used the one power to twist their minds. He pitted Ashaman against each other, fostering paranoia and distrust so that none could unite against him. To Taim, the Ashaman were not soldiers, not brothers, not men. They were tools, weapons, cattle to be herded and discarded. Logain's power rested on the exact opposite: mutual respect and solidarity. He saw the Ashaman as his equals. He called them brothers. He shared their pain, their fear, their shame of being men who channeled in a world that hated them. He did not demand obedience. He earned it through honesty, compassion, and the quiet courage to stand with them, even when it cost him everything. This bond was unbreakable. Taim's men feared their master. Logain's men loved theirs. Taim's followers plotted against each other. Logain's loyalists protected each other. Taim's reign was built on division. Logain's resistance was built on unity. In the end, this was the tactical advantage that could not be defeated. A leader who cared more about his men than his own power. Logain understood a truth Taim never would. The strength of an army is not in its weapons, but in the loyalty of its soldiers. And by treating the Ashaman as men, not tools, he forged a force far more dangerous than any army team could raise. A brotherhood willing to die for each other. The Shadow's greatest weapon inside the Black Tower was not violence, it was temptation. Taim offered power, glory, revenge against the world that had hunted male channelers. He promised the Ashaman mastery over the nations that feared them, dominance over the Aes Sedai who had gentled their kind for millennia. He made darkness seem like liberation and corruption seem like justice. For many Ashaman, the lure was too strong to resist. Logain Ablar was the only man who could resist it, and the only man who could show the Ashaman the path to resist it too. He knew the hunger for power, the thirst for revenge, the agony of being hunted and hated. He had been the false dragon, the pretender who had chased glory and power until it destroyed him. He had felt the temptation of the shadow, the whisper of easy power, the lie that cruelty could fix pain. And so he refused. When Taim and his dreadlords pressured Logain to swear allegiance to the Dark One, to embrace the Shadow's power, to join their corrupt regime, Logain said no. When they threatened to kill him, to still him further, to torture his loyalists, Logain said no. When they offered him a crown, a kingdom, mastery of the Black Tower itself, Logain said no. This refusal made him the moral anchor of the Black Tower. In a fortress drowning in corruption, Logain was the only point of light, the only man who would not bend, would not break, would not sell his soul for power. The sane Ashaman rallied to him, not just for safety, but for salvation. He became the conscience of the Black Tower, the last reminder of what the Ashaman were meant to be, protectors, not destroyers. Mazrim Taim saw the Black Tower as one thing, a blunt weapon of destruction. He wanted an army of ruthless, brainwashed killers, men who cared nothing for life, nothing for mercy, nothing but to burn the world in the Dark One's name. He wanted a weapon to break the light, to conquer nations, to drown the world in blood. The Ashaman were not warriors to Taim. They were a club to be swung, a flame to be unleashed. Logain Ablar saw the Black Tower as something entirely different, a disciplined order of protectors. He envisioned a fortress where male channelers were trained not to destroy, but to defend, not to conquer, but to heal, not to rule the world, but to protect it from the shadow. He dreamed of an Ashaman that stood with the light, that repaired the harm done by false dragons and Taim's corruption, that redeemed the name of male channelers everywhere. The tactical liberation of the Black Tower was a masterclass in subtle, decisive strategy. Logain did not challenge Taim openly until his network was ready, until the loyalists held key positions, until the moment was perfect. He struck at the heart of Taim's regime, targeting dreadlords, disrupting compulsion rituals, and freeing brainwashed Ashaman from Taim's control. He used the tower's own corridors, its own wards, its own layout against Taim's forces, turning the tyrant's fortress into his trap. It was a bloodless, precise victory, not the slaughter Taim would have wrought, but a purification. Logain freed the Black Tower from corruption, not by destroying it, but by reclaiming its soul. He turned Taim's weapon of destruction into a shield of the light. In the heat of the Black Tower's liberation, as Taim's forces fell and the Loyalists secured the fortress, a moment of truth arrived for Logain Ablar. Hidden in the deepest vaults of the tower were ancient, forbidden artifacts of unimaginable power. Relics of the Age of Legends, weapons that could make Logain the most powerful channeler in the world, a true dragon, a ruler without equal. For any man, the temptation would have been overwhelming. Logain walked past them. He did not take a single artifact. In that critical moment, Logain chose the safety and loyalty of his men over personal glory, over infinite power, over the crown he had once craved more than life itself. This was the moment Logain Ablar completed his redemption. This was the moment the false dragon died forever, and the true guardian was born. He proved that his mission was never about power, never about conquest, never about crowns. It was always about the men who had trusted him, the souls he had sworn to protect, the soul of the Black Tower itself. Taim had built his reign on power and fear. Logain built his on sacrifice and mercy. And in that choice, Logain won more than a fortress. He won the eternal loyalty of the Ashaman. The Black Tower is no longer a den of shadow. It is no longer a prison for male channelers. Under Logain Ablar's quiet leadership, it has become a fortress of the light, a home for the lost, a sanctuary for those who once had nowhere to turn. Logain has purged the corruption, broken the chains of fear, and reclaimed the purpose of the Ashaman. He entered the Black Tower, a stilled pretender, a forgotten man. He leaves it a liberator, a guardian, a savior. The resistance is won. The corruption is purged. The weapon is purified. But Logain's greatest battle is still to come, the last battle, where he will stand as the leader of the Ashaman and fight to defend the world he once sought to conquer. The pretender is gone. The protector has arrived. The last battle has come. The Dark One's forces pour across the field of Marilor, an ocean of shadow, Trollocs, Murdral, and Dreadlords, sweeping aside all who stand against the end of days. The Light's armies are broken, dwindling, on the brink of annihilation. Hope is a whisper, courage a spark, survival a dream. And into this chaos steps one man, Logain Ablar, once a false dragon, once a stilled captive, once a rebel in the heart of the Black Tower, now the undisputed leader of the Ashaman, the shield of the light, the uncrowned guardian of a world he once sought to conquer. As the commander of the Ashaman during the last battle, Logain Ablar faced a tactical nightmare. His men were vastly outnumbered, exhausted, drained of the one power, and facing an enemy that knew no fear, no mercy, no retreat. The Light's flanks were collapsing, its allies fractured, its hope fading with every passing minute. To charge was suicide. To flee was treason. To stand was to die. Yet Logain did not flinch. He did not roar. He did not chase glory. He adapted. Logain's greatest strategic gift was not offensive power. It was resilience. Forged by his stillness, tempered by his resistance in the Black Tower, hardened by a lifetime of loss, he understood the last battle was not won by charging into the shadow. It was won by enduring it. He reorganized the Ashaman into tight, impenetrable defensive formations, layers of shield weaves, coordinated counterattacks, and controlled withdrawals that preserved lives while holding the line. Every maneuver was calculated to preserve the Light's dwindling forces. Every weave was designed to protect, not destroy. Where other commanders sought glory in bold charges, Logain sought victory in steadfastness. He turned the Ashaman from a weapon of destruction into a wall of light, a wall no shadow could breach. Under his command, the Ashaman did not just survive the darkest hours of the last battle they held. They held the line. They held the hope. They held the light against a flood that would have drowned the world. Logain's defensive mastery did not just win battles, it saved the light from total annihilation. In the bloodiest hour of the last battle, as Logain stood atop the front lines, weaving shield after shield to protect his men, he experienced a transcendent revelation, the seal moment, the truth that redefined his life and his legacy. He realized that true glory, true strength, true greatness was not found in conquest, in crowns, in armies, in destruction. It was found in protection. For a lifetime, Logain had chased glory as a conqueror, as a false dragon, as a warlord, as a man who sought to rule by force. He had thought glory was in taking. He had thought power was in breaking. But in that moment, he understood. Glory is in saving. Power is in shielding. Greatness is in standing between the innocent and the dark so that others may live. This was the moment Logain Ablar was fully redeemed. The last fragment of the false dragon died. The last echo of ambition faded. The man who had once wanted to burn the world now dedicated every breath, every weave, every ounce of his strength to defending it. He did not fight to win, he fought to protect. He did not fight to rule, he fought to serve. The seal moment transformed Logain from a great commander into a legendary guardian. He became the living embodiment of the Ashaman's true purpose, not to destroy, but to defend, not to conquer, but to preserve, not to rule, but to shield. In that choice, he became greater than any dragon, any king, any conqueror the wheel had ever known. The last battle's greatest parallel is not between light and shadow, but between two men, Rand al'Thor and Logain Ablar. Two men who bore the weight of channeling, who were called pretenders, who were broken by the world, who rose to lead in humanity's darkest hour. Yet their paths to victory were mirror opposites. One bore the burden alone, the other bore it with his men. Rand al'Thor fought the last battle as a solitary sacrifice. He stood alone against the Dark One, separated from his friends, carrying the weight of all creation on his shoulders, willing to destroy and die to save the world. His leadership was that of a martyr, alone, unyielding, absolute. Logain Ablar fought the last battle as a selfless companion. He stood with his men, shoulder to shoulder, sharing their pain, their fear, their struggle, leading from the front lines not as a king, but as a brother. His leadership was that of a guardian, present, united, compassionate. Together, they were the perfect balance. Rand, the soul of the light, Logain, the shield of the light. Rand, the sacrifice, Logain, the steward. Rand, the savior, Logain, the protector. Neither could have won without the other. In their parallel struggle, the wheel revealed the truest form of leadership. It is not found in standing above others, but in standing with them. The world turned to a new dawn, the Fourth Age. For male channelers, this was a crossroads. Repeat the mistakes of the Age of Legends, fall back into fear and corruption, or build a new future of peace, healing, and purpose. Logain Ablar did not hesitate. He would build the future. Under Logain's leadership, the Black Tower was transformed forever. No longer a fortress of war, no longer a breeding ground of corruption, no longer a refuge for anger and fear. It became a permanent institution of peace and healing. A place where male channelers were trained to protect, to heal, to serve, to use their power for the good of all. Logain instituted a new creed. Power is not for domination, but for service. Strength is not for conquest, but for protection. The mistakes of the past, false dragons, tyrants, corrupt channelers, would never be repeated. He personally oversaw the healing of men broken by the power, the training of young channelers, and the building of a bond between the Black Tower and the White Tower, based on mutual respect, not fear. His empathy for all who can channel became the foundation of the Fourth Age. He knew their pain, their fear, their shame, their isolation, for he had lived every moment of it. He became the voice for the voiceless, the shield for the vulnerable, the leader who understood that true strength is lifting others up, not holding them down. When the wheel of time weaves the annals of the Fourth Age, one name will stand above all others for the male channelers, Logain Ablar, not as a pretender, not as a rebel, but as the man who redeemed the Ashaman, who purified the Black Tower, who shielded the world in its darkest hour, who built a future where men who channel could live without fear, without shame, without persecution. He was once called a false dragon, a pretender, a usurper, yet he became the most genuine guardian of the Dragon Reborn's mission. Rand al'Thor won the war. Logain Ablar secured the peace. Rand died to save the world. Logain lived to protect it. Rand was the savior. Logain was the steward. This is the ultimate irony and beauty of Logain's journey. The man who falsely claimed the dragon's mantle became the only man worthy of preserving it. The man who once wanted to conquer the world became the man who saved it. The man who was broken by power became the man who healed power's wounds. He never wore a crown. He never sat on a throne. He never demanded glory. But he earned something far more precious: the eternal love and loyalty of every male channeler. the gratitude of a world he once fought against, and a legacy as the uncrowned guardian of the light. Logain Ablar's journey is complete. The pretender has become the guardian. The conqueror has become the protector. The broken man has become the pillar of the light. He walked through fire, stillness, shadow, and war, and emerged as the shield the world needed most. The Black Tower stands. The Ashaman thrive. The Fourth Age unfolds in peace. Male channelers walk with heads held high, no longer hunted, no longer feared, no longer broken. All because of one man who chose sacrifice over glory, protection over power, service over dominion. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and go. But the legacy of Logain Ablar will never fade. The false dragon who became the light's greatest shield. The man who proved that true greatness is not in being crowned. It is in being needed.